great to see all these heads and faces showing up. This is our first Skills Summer Series seminar. We're going to start in a second, and we've got Conan and Kate who will moderate the Q&A throughout. The way the summer seminars works, after Skills in March, we had a couple of workshops that people thought were really helpful and they liked it, so we decided to do more of those. We invited the community to suggest what topics they want to hear, and the idea was to have an opportunity for both vendors and law firms to get together in a learning opportunity. This is not a sales pitch. This is not a product demo. It's really what they think can help us be better, do our jobs better. So that's the framework around it. Some of the vendors ask how come they're not here, and it's because they didn't pay attention. If anyone has other suggestions they want, if you go to the Skills Seminars tab, you could submit other sessions. I'm talking for the vendors who are watching the recording of this and thinking they have something to contribute to the community. So you could submit those proposals, and then we'll decide what do we do. We're going to stop at August for ILTA, and then we might start again in September. But we're going to take some time break in between. With that, I'm going to invite Kevin to start telling us how to extract data the smart way.
All right, thanks, Oz. Great to see everybody. Fantastic turnout on a Friday morning. So thanks everybody for making time to get together and talk about a really important subject, something that I think is top of mind for everybody right now, which is data strategy and data for firms. So we are in a privileged position at Centari because we get to work with some really great firms and see how the industry is evolving in real time around data and using data in the world of generative AI and next wave of law firm practice. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to really focus on practical strategies. So I think there's there's a lot that's been said in the last few quarters about data strategy more broadly, what data means for legal industry. We want to use this session to help everybody here walk away with some really tangible, practical ways to communicate ROI to their stakeholders in their firms. So it's meant to be interactive, and would love if folks chime in with questions and comments in the chat. We're going to ask people to go off mute at various points in time. We're going to have some polls on Slido, so we're going to have some engaging feedback gathering as we go through this, and we have a workshop that we'll do together, a few discussion points on ROI communication, identifying data and knowledge assets within your firm, and how to capture that. So this is really, exactly like Oz said, meant to be a time for all of us to walk away with some useful practical takeaways. So let's start by asking, when you hear data, what's the first image that comes to mind? So for any of us who kind of, our memories go back to the 90s, of course, the Matrix, data is one of those things that immediately sounds pretty boring. We start thinking of bits and bytes and mainframes and other kind of analog stuff. When we're talking about data in this context, we're really talking about really the firm's most critical intellectual capital, where data is being used broadly here. This is data could mean documents, it could mean emails, it could mean memos. It's data is really the information that you house in your organizations that is truly what gives you a competitive edge in your markets. So data is really the crown jewels of each major law firm and law firms across the board. So that's what we're going to focus on today. It's your intellectual capital, and there it is. It's the case law, it's precedent, it's unique insights that your attorneys have. It is the translation of thoughts and ideas into tangible assets, and we'll talk about how we can actually translate those ideas into assets that you can use and compete with. So moving right along here, you need a data strategy. It's kind of like telling a fish it needs water. We are all swimming in data in the legal world. I took that quote from the "This is Water" speech by David Foster Wallace. So it's kind of like, morning boys, how's the water? And the other fish is like, what the hell is water? Because really law is a data business. And that is something that is often forgotten, but I think is really coming back to the forefront. I mean, it's been a data business all the way since the earliest days of putting law into written form in documents and books. And then of course Lexis and West were the first to digitize records and make it broadly accessible. They were kind of the first data information services companies for law. And now what we're seeing is a transformation of law into an industry where private data is mobilized and firms are finding ways to leverage their private data to gain that edge. So this is we have like kind of types of data and their value with kind of this bullseye analogy. So everyone has access to external data. That's public data sets like Edgar. It's data you can get from data information services companies like Thomson Reuters and Lexis, and other providers of sort of market data and case law and regulations and statutes. And then you have all your internal data. That's your emails, your documents, chronologies, billing data, everything kind of under the sun there. And that's really your proprietary knowledge. But that data typically exists in an unstructured format. So when we're talking about how do we use data to compete, we're really talking about that derivative data. So taking all of that information, both external and internal, and deriving insights and knowledge and true competitive value, especially when you combine that external with that internal and use it as a more complete picture of the universe that you operate in. That's where you have something really special. So this is where we get to do our first poll to level set on how would you rate your firm's current ability to easily access and leverage your internal knowledge for strategic advantage. So you can use that QR code if you have your phones on you. That's going to take you to a Slido poll, and we'll give everyone time. It's like our first poll of the day, so give everyone time to grab that QR code.
We also put the link in the comments of the Zoom. You could click on the Zoom. And while we have announcement, this session is being recorded, so anything you say will be used against you.
But the polls are anonymous, I will add. So we are not ourselves aggregating data in this exercise. So great, everyone can get in there. And all right, so once you're getting in, you'll see that we have a sliding scale here, scale of 1 to 5. On 1, it's, your knowledge access is pretty limited. You're relying on tribal knowledge and hallway conversations. And then 5 is you have instant access at your fingertips, anything you need. And this is very exciting. It's like watching a horse race. We see that pretty interesting bell curve here. This is very interesting standard distribution. I'm very curious who is in that 5%. And if only we knew, but y'all are crushing it. You got to share your secrets at some point in the session. And yeah, pretty much as expected, most of us feel like there's we're there, we're kind of like making progress, but there's definitely room for growth. And then some folks feel like they're earlier in the journey. So this is all great, great place to start, and good place for us to have this conversation. So let me go back to presentation here. All right, so law is a data business. Sure, we have a lot of data in firms today, but then we have this whole thing called generative AI, and everyone is super excited about generative AI. Chatbots and document generation. It can do red lines. It can generate issues lists. So it's all this exciting, powerful technology. But what does it mean for the business of law, and how does data tie in with this? So I think the thought experiment that is not just a hypothetical, but like a real world call to action. It's what if your client could generate all documents they need without you? Without a large law firm or mid-size or small firm, any firm, what would they still need you for? And it's not just a hypothetical, it's the world that we're going into. And maybe this is for folks we have not met before. I started my career at Paul Hastings on their M&A team, so kind of a large law firm world, and then went in-house for about 5 years doing in-house legal work. And so I kind of saw that evolution of the in-house world more recently into let's see how much work we can bring in-house. Most recently, I was doing real estate deals. We were trying to do a lot of deals in-house, even purchase and sale. So that is a trend that is happening broadly, and we can expect it to accelerate. as in-house teams have access to tools that help them level up and actually do more document generation. And it's not just NDAs, not just MSAs. It's also a future where you could have an in-house team form a fund or an in-house team negotiate an M&A deal up to a certain value, perhaps. So then the question is, what do clients need law firms for? And this is where data is essential. So the overlooked opportunity and the competitive mandate really is to use generative AI to harness your data and to compete with your data. So I'll like hover on this for just a little bit. Why does data matter for large law firms? If a client could do some of the more increasingly commoditized work themselves, they still absolutely 100% need outside counsel to guide them through an increasingly complex regulatory environment, increasingly complex transactional environment. And firms and lawyers who are experts in their domain have unique insights into market trends, unique insights into risk factors, because you do more matters, you do more deals, you do more cases than in-house teams ever will. And that's not changing anytime soon. What is changing is the stack ranking of attorneys that are mobilizing their data and their knowledge to advantage and delivering unique insights to their clients that set them apart from peer firms through differentiated value. So that is the key. So poll number two, who at your firm has been tasked with taking this competitive mandate and developing a knowledge strategy, or I think in this case, we should say a data strategy. So think of this, who in your firm has kind of talked about having a data strategy and has been thinking about these types of questions that we're talking about? Is that KM? And this is a Slido again, so you can use the link in the chat or use the QR code. Is it KM? Is it marketing? Is it the chair of the department? Is it firm leadership, IT, InfoGov? Do you have a data science team? Do you have an innovation team? Or is nobody really thinking about this yet? Or thinking about it in ways that might not be sort of in line with industry trends? So take a moment to respond there, and we will look at that together. Right, so got that screen. Perfect. All right, so it looks like KM is the front runner here. Awesome. And that is, I remember 2 years ago, if anyone here recalls, when Gen AI was starting to really become the topic du jour in legal innovation. And it's like, what does this mean for the future of KM? And I think a lot of us were talking about this at the time and said, this is, KM will be more relevant than ever in this era. And I think that has absolutely been the case. And we're seeing that play out more and more. So not surprising to see 40%, 41% in KM, IT, 15% nobody. And I'm sure there's crossover increasingly, but this is really interesting. And a few firms having those data science teams. That's a trend that we're definitely observing, and it's interesting to see 5% have that as well across 39 respondents. Awesome. All right, I'm gonna go back to the deck here. All right, one more Slido exercise. If you already have Slido pulled up, we're gonna do one more here. So when we're thinking about that competitive differentiation in this version of the future where we are competing with intellectual capital, competing with data, what is the specific data for your firm that matters the most? Because this is going to be different firm to firm. And this is where you must have a data strategy. Everyone has to have a data strategy. That doesn't mean the same thing for every firm. No two firms are going to look exactly the same. For some firms, it might be M&A deal points if you're leading M&A practice. For some firms, you might be doing a lot of financing work. You want to get debt finance grids with all debt finance deal points. If you're a litigation heavy shop, maybe it's taking all the briefs and seeing what were the winning briefs for different types of matters. Is it a clause library? So we're going to do a word cloud. Believe this to be a word cloud in Slido. So think about it for yourselves and add into the Slido poll some ideas. Let's see if this works. We will do like a crowdsourced word cloud. Nice. Knowledge broadly, deal points, love it. Ooh, opposing counsel, really interesting. Yeah, and kind of aggregating information on past matters and how you've negotiated those across from specific opponents and what positions have they anchored on historically, and how can you use those insights to your client's advantage. You're saying matter dashboards and profiles, multi-jurisdiction regulations. Yeah, chivalry activism. It's great. And again, totally anonymized here. So, we will not try to, no one will try to triangulate which firm is saying which. But hopefully this right here becomes inspiration and something can be taken away. So everyone should, I guess it's being recorded, so we'll have this up on YouTube. But screenshot it, save this for yourselves so you can use this in some of your conversations next week with your teams. Give it just a few more, another 20 seconds or so. Check this out. Expert witness and vendor recommendations. Very, very interesting. Ooh, AI prompt library. That's cool. So that's definitely on the bleeding edge there. And it looks like the leading three: matter, data, deal points, and precedents. Totally the pillars of data strategy from what we've seen as well. So makes a lot of sense. I mean, deal points is music to our ears, of course. Awesome. Tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge is interesting because there we're talking about that lived experience of your attorneys. I mean, if you're with a firm that's been practicing for 100+ years and you have this deep bench of historical knowledge on how to negotiate and how to compete for deal flow, that is tacit knowledge that you want to capture, especially as you have generational turnover within firms. So it all comes back to data. All right, I'm going to go back to the deck. Super, super interesting there. All right, so one more slide. We're keeping it interactive. We know that this data is essential. We had a really interesting word cloud. What are the biggest barriers to leveraging that data within your firms? So this is going to be kind of like a group therapy session, because I think everybody has experienced this in different ways. On the vendor side, we've seen every flavor of this. We're kind of the vendor customer ecosystem. We're all trying to work for success ultimately, and these are some of the barriers to success. So let's talk about what could cause a really great data strategy to disappear into the Bermuda Triangle. Get us another Slido. You can follow the link or use the QR code. I'll voice these over as folks start to add their responses. So we have data silos, which might be just working with a really, really, really messy data set, really hard to even start to create structure from it, even with Gen AI. Resistance to change, lack of end user adoption would be two. Like tech integration. So lots of new vendors, lots of startups, exciting tech. Are you finding that legacy software is resisting integrating with that new tech? Demonstrating clear ROI to leadership. So is leadership like, we don't really get it. Things have been fine. We don't need to do anything new. Client concerns. I've heard this a lot in the last few weeks, that some clients are increasingly demanding firms use Gen AI in different ways, and other clients are increasingly like nope, cannot do. So how are you managing those restriction lists? And then lack of skills, tools, and methods. All right, so let's see what we have in the results. And there we go, the big reveal. So we got the top three issues: data silos. No surprise there. Difficulty demonstrating clear ROI to leadership. That's good. That's number two, because that's what we're going to spend most of the rest of our time doing. Client concerns. That's very interesting. Resistance to change is actually seems like it's lower on the list, which is good. Maybe that's an industry trend. And good to see that integrations and lack of skills are not the main blockers. We're really talking about those data silos, existing data quality and structure, and then demonstration of value leadership and client concerns as our top three. Great. So back into it. This is just a case study. So we do a lot of work with firms on deal point extraction as one of our use cases. We've just had a view into what this looks like in a lot of places. So we'll see if this resonates with anyone here, and think about what your version of this might be. because this is to kind of frame our next discussion, which is how to think about ROI and use cases and tying those together. So we're focused on deal data for this case study. Say you're a law firm with a leading M&A practice. What are you using that data for? So it's kind of like, why does this data matter? In this case, it's for business development. It's kind of that top of funnel client sourcing, RFP responses, like using your matter data and deal history to drive higher fidelity, more compelling RFPs. And then benchmarking, that's kind of frontline attorney work. You're in the middle of a deal, has to close by the end of the week, and you're negotiating a key deal point, and you need some industry data to back up your position. So that's uses of data. Then you're going to think, all right, it's important. How are we currently extracting it? How are we currently structuring this data? In this case, and this can actually describe several of our customers, not just any specific customer, but we often see this being done manually. So you take that data set, you're having someone like an associate manually search through documents and answering surveys and questionnaires, typically non-billable and typically very fatiguing. So that leads to poor or inconsistent quality of the outputs. They just want to get it done and get on to the next deal. And then often we see a KM team performing QA, entering the data into an existing matter database or experience database. So we kind of size this up when we think about ROI. So it's important. Here's how it's being done in a very painful way. And here's what the economic implications are. So on a global scale, if we think about 350 largest firms in the world, let's say they're each doing 200 deals a year across 4 practice areas, 200 deals on average across 4 practice areas. And they're spending 6 hours on non-billable extraction per deal at $750 an hour. That's $1 billion problem for the legal industry. So just thinking about, this is like back of the envelope math, but thinking about how to demonstrate ROI to firm leadership, why does it matter? This is the type of calculus you can perform to drive that case. So we talked about types of data. We talked about who's tasked with getting it. Now let's talk about accessibility of data. This is a discussion. So actually, we will not use the Slido for this. If anyone was already getting in there, apologies. We're just going to talk through this. So, and we would love to make this interactive. Folks can add into the comments. And also, if you have a notepad or you're taking notes on the session, this is where we're getting into the portion of today where we're going to help everyone here have some takeaways and kind of walk through a thought process for helping you come away with something you can really demonstrate to firm leadership or your stakeholders. So we talked about the types of data you need to track, the crown jewels of your firm, what resources are currently required to access that data. And just think about, like, jot down for yourselves, think about how is it currently captured? What's the ease of access from 1 to 5? If it's like with 5 being the hardest. If it's super easy, no problem. Like, you're in a good spot. If it's somewhere between 1 and 5, then this exercise is for you because we're going to talk about how to come up with a better way to capture that data and demonstrate ROI. And as you think about ease of access, it's not just like what files is it in and who's extracting it. It's also which team members are required to invest non-billable time to extract it. Are you writing off time for extraction and structuring this data? Do you have to get vendors involved? So which stakeholders on the vendor side you need to include?
And Kevin, can you just explain what is easy and what is hard, 1 or 5?
Yes. So I would say 1 is easy and 5 is hard on that scale. Yeah. And makes those. And firm politics. So that is a blocker. Maybe someone has a pet project that is getting in the way of what you've identified to be a more compelling priority for the firm. So that's all kind of in play. And then as a last step of this exercise, think about the time savings that you would see if this data could be gathered automatically, on a weekly basis or monthly basis. So just take a minute to think through that and jot that down. Cool. It looks like some folks have responded in Slido, so let's just hop over there to see some responses. Just ad hoc here. All right, great. So probably no surprises from the last poll. We saw that one of the biggest challenge was um, the state of the data. So like where it lives and its messy format, like how do we actually get our arms around this? So it's not surprising that we're seeing this trend towards the four, between 3 to 5. Really hard to get our arms around this data. Totally makes sense. So at this point, we should have had, if you're following along with the exercise and preparing for like a takeaway at the end here, you will have at this point thought about knowledge assets and key strategic data assets that your firm has within the context of your own firm. You've thought about who is required to access that data. What are the specific potential blockers to accessing that data, whether it's politics or vendors or time required and manual tasks. And you've kind of thought about how hard is it to access. And then you're starting to think now about if you could automate the access of this data, which is where Gen AI comes into play. If it were possible to use Gen AI or your next wave technology to automate these steps and turn this unstructured data set into something that is structured and tangible, whatever that is, whether that's case chronologies, whether that's briefs and memos, whether that's deal points, whether that's matter and billing data. So in your own use case, that's what we're thinking about now. And we're going to go into the next step here, which is ROI demonstration. And this brings it home. So we think about ROI in two ways. And if you're making a case to firm leadership, you are ultimately making an ROI case because you're saying, we understand it's competitively significant. We understand kind of where it lives and how much it's going to cost to extract it and structure it. But it's going to cost something to do that. And why is it better to pursue a tech-based approach or an innovation-based approach as opposed to doing things the way they're currently being done? So the two prongs that we see our customers use a lot are utilization and cost savings. So that's just attorney utilization often. So if we are able to automate this workflow, we're going to see a utilization boost of 10%, because that 10% of their time that's spent on non-billable tasks will now be deployed into billable work. So M&A deal point surveys, like totally low-hanging fruit for that. Then think about revenue growth, new client opportunities. So if you're able to capture this data and mobilize it, what does that give you in terms of client upside, both from retention of clients, like proving to clients that you are still the best firm for their needs, and for going into an RFP with a really strong case for why your firm is uniquely suited for that matter, because you have unique data assets that help you deliver unique insights. So those are the two prongs here. And I'm just going to keep going through this into the next piece. So I don't think we have a Slido for this one legitimately. So we are just going to stay on this slide. So two-pronged approach, and this is a workshop component. So we have utilization and we have revenue opportunities. Oh, actually, Chelsea told me we do have a Slido here. So we are going to open that up and folks can start adding responses and thoughts into the Slido. So great, we're going to pull that up. You can use the QR code or the link. And just to walk through this in real time, we have utilization, which is time savings. You can calculate utilization as time saved times the billing rate. So we're saving, 5 hours a week across 150 attorneys, billing 850 an hour. And we're putting that back into billable work. So that's a quick and easy way to calculate back of the envelope utilization. Revenue opportunities, harder to forecast, candidly. So you have to think about, and you might have some data within your own firms, like how many RFPs have you been losing recently? Why are those RFPs lost? If you can demonstrate differentiated value, would you be able to win 10% more RFPs? What does that translate into in terms of revenue or client retention? Which clients are kind of looking at other firms and thinking about like, oh, should we go with this other shop that has a little bit more expertise that they demonstrate here? How can you retain that client through demonstration of unique value? So that's a way to tie it all together and start creating the case for firm leadership or any other stakeholders where this will be useful for you. And if we've been receiving responses, we can take a look there. Great. Perfect. So great question here. And we'll make this open as part of the workshop. So question is, are there other prongs your firm would include in your approach? So is there anything that we are not capturing in this ROI calculus that you think could be helpful for yourself or for any of your peers in this seminar? So please feel free to join the Slido and add any other ideas for the group. And we'll start reading these off as we go. So top of the list here, attorney retention, really great point, because attorneys want to work at innovative firms with good tech. And we've seen the surveys that the ABA has done where tech is one of the reasons people choose to stay or leave. So that's actually a really, really interesting one. And when your largest client calls the firm chair and says, every time I ask a partner in your firm, I get a perfect answer a week too late. So true. And there's less and less patience from clients when Gen AI is able to deliver answers really quickly, especially the powerful research models. They can get really good answers to information that is publicly available. So here again, publicly available information, more and more accessible to clients than ever before. Private, unique, guarded information, still not accessible. So you still have an edge there. Reduction in write-offs, innovation, new and innovative markets and opportunities that hadn't been considered can be created. Super, super great point. And anecdotal stories of new work won and margin improvement. Awesome. So great. So folks can take these away and include these in your internal conversations and communication of value to your stakeholders. All right, common pitfalls. So we have a great framework now. We have you've been following along with the workshop, you've identified assets, you have figured out how you're currently extracting it, how you can improve the extraction in the future through automation. And this is, I guess, where I can share Gen AI is very effective at structuring data. And I know I promised those, no sales pitches on this call. I'll say broadly speaking, generative AI is good at many things, and one of the overlooked opportunities is using Gen AI to take unstructured data sets, including very messy data sets, and create structure from those data sets, including with deeper attorney level reasoning. So workflows that would require many, many attorney hours to perform, like deal sheets or grid preparation or chronologies, can now be automated with high fidelity, even better than was possible a year ago. So the technology is rapidly advancing, and this is very, very real and very, very possible. The pitfalls that we see, perfect being the enemy of the good, classic, ignoring the attorney adoption challenges, believing the plug and play fantasy. So no tool on the market is a panacea. It is often requested from customers that a panacea exists, and maybe someday it will. But you have to assume that if kind of everything is being offered to you by a vendor, red flag should go up. It's to do this really well requires specialization and focus. And if they're offering everything, you should be prepared that on your side, you're going to have to do a lot of setup and configuration and prompt engineering, which is just state of the tech. Focusing on tools, not outcomes. This is also, I think, was very common in the first year post ChatGPT, where it was like the tech is super interesting. Everyone wants to get their hands on the new shiny thing, but then what is the demonstration of ROI? What is the actual tangible value? And that's hopefully something we've helped flesh out in this exercise together. And then the last one, forgetting that risk management is multifaceted. So often in procuring new tech and frontier technology, risk management is a really key voice in the mix. Very important to have InfoGov looped in, and they are a key stakeholder. The risk of risk management is forgetting that not adopting technology, not embracing innovation is a risk in and of itself. It's an existential business risk. So it is communicating to your stakeholders and making sure it is considered holistically beyond data security, essential table stakes, but a over resistance or an over aversion to risk can also be really a fatal error that many legacy businesses have made throughout history. So that is also very important.
Hey, Kevin, we can I interrupt you for a minute? We have a question, a really good question from Catherine. And I'm sorry, Catherine, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name. But the question is, what would you say to firm leadership that sees the utilization calculation as lost revenue? Of course, the another age-old story of if we automate things, then we're going to lose billable time, and that's our revenue model. So what do you say to that?
All right, I'm going to have my response, and I want to open the floor from here. So what we're seeing is what tasks are being automated. So if we're automating a task that is a traditional billable value task, like we're going to automate the generation of the first draft of a brief, or we're going to automate the first turn of a red line for a purchase agreement. That is feels very, very threatening. If we were automating manual deal point extraction and entry, which would not be billed traditionally, then you're taking, and we see firms where associates are getting billable credit, it's non-billable work where they're getting credit towards their minimum, but it's not being billed to the client. If you're automating those types of tasks, that is directly driving utilization, because we all know there's more enough work for associates to do. They will have more billable time that they can bill. They don't want to be doing deal sheets. They want to be, going to, build their skill set and produce value, which is what the firms want to. So we think of it as is the automation affecting truly billable, strategic work, or is it automating a essential data structuring, data extraction, non-billable workflow that then helps enable downstream strategic work? But would love to open up the floor if anyone has real world examples of how they've seen this.
I was going to post the question back to Catherine and ask: is that are you seeing that the lost utilization is actually on billable tasks, or do you think the argument that this is going to be written down or written off anyway, or even not listed? Catherine?
I think the data extraction is a really good example where, that of course that's not billable, and so that is good time to save. But when we get into generative AI and some of the document drafting tools, I think that is time that otherwise arguably would have been spent or would have been billed.
Sorry, I lost that because, of course, Oz's dog just took up all of my screen. Thank you. Anyone else?
I would just say the data extraction, I get that. I think that makes a lot of sense. But when you look at generative AI, part of it would be generating first drafts of documents, and maybe that is billable work or would otherwise have been billable work.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to jump in here, my take on this, and my take has been, and if you just look historically, that law firms seem to fill in the work, and maybe there's a belief that the cannibalization of billable work will happen so rapidly that there won't be enough time to fill that in. But I mean, deal flow has increased for decades. The amount of data, yeah, we have better tools to handle data, but the amount of data getting generated, and now with AI generating some of it too, is even becoming, even if you look back at big data, what was that, 10 years ago or more even, that seems like, we wouldn't call that big data probably today. We just call it data. And now we're seeing that contracts are longer than ever, and they'll probably continue to get longer. The regulatory landscape is getting more complex. I feel there is work being left on the table. I've even heard anecdotally from clients from working in a few different firms, or from partners really saying that, if we had more throughput, we could take on more work. The client has work to give us. So that might not be the same for everybody, but I feel that you kind of, so maybe to your question, Catherine, if this is a good answer, is just try to point back historically. Look at these very disruptive technologies, like going from writing letters to emails, or from doing red lines manually to using the machine to do it, or same thing for redacting documents and discovery review. So I think this has happened before. The complexity in the data is increasing, and and then lastly, if the tools can do it, then someone will do it. And you can even point down the road to the big four and looking at what's happening in Arizona with KPMG, and they're trying to figure out this kind of automation. So I don't, yeah, that's kind of how I would sell it. I'd package it up a little nicer than when I just said.
That was great, Conan. Couldn't agree more, and actually brings us nicely into our wrap up here. So we have our bring it all home into an implementation plan. So identify a high impact practice area, high impact knowledge asset, data asset, measure the results obsessively. So this is to measure data impact with data is always a good thing. And then expand methodologically. There you go. And cover more use cases, but start with one and then expand. So we have there's a Q&A, but really it's more, let's open up the floor and I'll have a conversation together about this workshop. And any questions or comments, reactions, real world experiences, we would love to open it up for the last bit here. Yeah, great point there.
I'm going to ask a question. Hopefully others will jump in. Don't be shy out there. Kevin, what use case or what value have you seen in your year or two venture into the legal tech space that you didn't anticipate?
Yeah, I think the level of, so I'll put it this way, attorney level reasoning is something that I did not expect the models to have as quickly as they have acquired it. And by attorney level reasoning, I don't mean like, can it generate an NDA? It's like, can you look at a merger agreement or a 300-page credit agreement and actually understand how cross-references relate to each other and define terms? Because that was what required like the most mental horsepower for me as an associate and then in-house counsel. So it was kind of a pretty wild moment when I realized that type of mental processing could be simulated. And maybe that's a good question for the group. Has anyone else had a wow moment recently, either in legal AI or with their own playing with Anthropic or Google research? Any really interesting experiences folks have had recently with Gen AI that has surprised them? I know everyone here has to have at least one. Planning a trip to the Bahamas and it gave you a fantastic margarita recommendation.
There's no travel without chatting first with our friends, my colleagues.
Yes. See, feel free to add in the chat.
Well, if we're going to go off legal, I mean, the number one use case is you have a bunch of things that are going to expire in your refrigerator, and you ask ChatGPT or the like to craft the recipe using basic household ingredients. That's great because planning dinners is not my forte, but I like to cook. So I usually buy a bunch of stuff, but I have nothing planned. And so now I have a solution for that.
I actually did have a legal thing. Someone gave me an agreement and I said, I can't have a non-compete. And there was a non-compete. And I asked my associate, Claude, what they think. And they said, even though there's non-compete, the way the confidentiality provision is stated might be read as non-compete. And that was mind-blowing to me. That was a lawyer level, brilliant comment. So of course it drafted, let's clarify. And it was really fantastic. So. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Conan and Kate. This is our first. There are many more coming. So we're going to share with you, if you could tell us, A, what you think about this format. And two, what else you want to hear now that you taste a little bit. You've got both in the comments if you want to click on the form, or if you point your camera at the screen. We would love to hear your feedback and suggestions. And we're going to see you every Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern time from now until ILTA. We're also going to have a social event at ILTA, so stay tuned for that. And the other announcement, we just published on the website the full report of the AI use cases. It's the same report tab where you could see Centari came as one of the most recommended legal AI vendors in there. So skills.law, and then go to the report surveys site, and you'll get it there. Thank you. And if you want to leave us in the comments or click on the link, it would be more helpful for us than just if you put on the chat over here. But we really appreciate your participation on Friday morning. Thank you all. Have a great weekend, and see you next Friday at 11.